Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you could join me for this practice tour today. Think of this as our docent training session. We're going to walk through a fantastic pop art collection together. We'll explore how a bunch of rebellious artists back in the 1960s started turning totally ordinary, everyday objects into masterpieces. And we'll even practice tackling some of those tough questions this kind of art still brings up. So, let's get started.
Okay, so imagine we're all standing here together, right in the main lobby of the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth. Now, before we even get to the art, I just want you to take a second and soak in the building itself. People often call this one of the world's most beautiful art museums, and you can really feel why. It's got this incredibly tranquil, oasis-like feeling designed to kind of slow you down and get you ready for what you're about to see. And what's amazing is that this stunningly modern building actually has really deep roots. It's the oldest museum in all of Texas, believe it or not. It was founded way back in 1892 by a group of 25 women who wanted to bring a whole new kind of culture to a city that was, well, mostly famous for cattle. The architect, a genius named Tadao Ando, created this incredible sense of calm using a really simple palette. You've got this smooth, polished concrete, these massive, soaring glass walls, and of course, water. He really believed in the honesty of materials, just letting these core elements speak for themselves. It creates the perfect, almost contemplative space for the art inside. All right, as we start making our way toward the galleries, we'd walk right past this huge installation called Antoine's Organ by Rashid Johnson. It's filled with all sorts of things like shea butter, books, and there's even a working piano in there. It's actually a perfect little introduction for our tour because it shows how even today's artists are using familiar, everyday materials to talk about really complex ideas. And that brings us right to the main idea of our pop art tour today. Back in the 1960s, artists started looking at the world around them, at advertising, supermarkets, city streets, and they basically asked, hey, why can't this stuff be art? They were really challenging the status quo, pushing us to see the ordinary things in our lives in a totally new, extraordinary way. We're going to start with an artist who is practically a legend of the American West and its unique visual style. His name is Edward Ruscha. He was actually trained as a commercial illustrator, and because of that, he had this brilliant eye for the graphic power of the stuff you'd see driving down the highway. Okay, take a look at this. It's a standard gas station. A super common sight, right? Something you'd see on any American road trip. But look at how Ruscha presents it. That dramatic, cinematic angle. It makes it feel massive, almost monumental. And that vibrant background, he made that with a commercial printing technique called a split fountain to get that perfect, seamless, sunsetty gradient. It's a trick you'd normally see in a magazine, which is exactly the point. Ruscha is totally blurring the line between commercial art and fine art. So, what's your first impression here? What does this feel like to you? More like a really cool advertisement, or does it feel like a work of fine art? A lot of people's gut reaction is, yeah, that looks like a really cool ad. That's a great observation. It does feel like an ad. And that usually leads to that classic million-dollar question that pop art always seems to bring up. Someone will look at it and say, I mean, it's just a gas station. Couldn't anyone do this? That is an absolutely fair question. So let's break it down. First, there's the power of the idea itself. Before Ruscha, very few artists would have even considered a gas station to be a worthy subject. He was the one who saw it as a kind of modern monument. Second, you have to look at the technique. Ruscha was a master of screen printing, and the flawless execution here, it's technically brilliant. And third, there's the cultural context. This piece is both a celebration and a bit of a critique of America's booming car culture. So yeah, while the subject seems simple, the ideas and the skill behind it are actually incredibly sophisticated. Okay, now let's follow Ruscha from the roadside right into the supermarket aisle. So here we have this super realistically painted, life-size jar of olives, but it's not just sitting on a shelf. It looks like it's hurtling through this weird, ambiguous olive green space, just moments away from smashing. This piece just perfectly captures what Ruscha meant by this quote. He absolutely loved to disorient the viewer, to take something totally familiar and make it weird. By making this simple jar of olives fly through the air, he turns what should be a quiet, still life into this moment of chaotic, noisy suspense. And that's that delicious paradox he was always chasing. So Ruscha took images from the everyday world, but the next artists we're going to look at, well, they went a step further. They used the actual materials of the everyday world, specifically stuff they just found lying around the city. Okay, let's spend a moment with this piece by the French artist Jacques Villeglé. What do we see here?
We've got layers of paper, bits and pieces of words and images, and it all looks really torn and weathered. What kind of materials do you think the artist might have used to create something like this?
So if you're thinking, wait, is that just ripped up posters? You'd be exactly right. Vigilé would literally walk the streets of Paris and rip thick layers of advertising posters right off the walls. His technique is called décollage. It's kind of the opposite of collage. So while collage is all about adding things together, décollage is subtractive. It's about tearing away layers to reveal what's hidden underneath. And when you get up close, you can really see these layers of history. Every single tear reveals a different advertisement, a different font, a different moment in time. Vigilé really saw himself as a kind of urban archaeologist, finding poetry and history in what most of us would just call street trash. He's capturing the visual noise of the city itself. Now, from torn paper, we're moving on to twisted metal. This piece is called Skull's Angel by John Chamberlain. And what you're looking at is welded steel from old cars. Chamberlain would take parts from wrecked automobiles and crush and compress them into these incredibly dynamic sculptures. You can really feel a sense of violence here, but there's also an incredible beauty to it. They almost look like these Baroque folds of fabric, but they're made of solid steel. That yellow might even remind you of an old New York City taxicab. And this is definitely a piece that gets a really strong reaction from people. It's not uncommon for someone to look at it and just say, I'm sorry, but why is this art? It literally looks like scrap metal from a junkyard. Another fantastic question. Chamberlain is such a fascinating artist because he's like a bridge between two major art movements. He took the raw, emotional energy of abstract expressionism, that focus on gesture. But instead of using paint, he used crushed car parts, a total icon of pop art. He brilliantly combined the feeling of one movement with the material of another. He didn't see it as junk. He actually called it garbage manure, waste material that can give birth to something new and beautiful. Okay, for our final stop on this tour, we're going to look at an artist who didn't just look at the everyday world for inspiration, he also looked at the very sacred world of art history and decided, you know what, I'm going to reframe that too. So we all know Botticelli's incredible, iconic Renaissance painting, The Birth of Venus, right? Well, this is Alain Jacquet's version. He used a mechanical screen printing process, and he broke the image down into a pattern of dots, kind of like what you'd see in an old comic book. Then he overlaid the whole thing with a camouflage pattern, and he even makes this really clever visual joke. Venus's scallop shell is made to look almost exactly like the corporate logo for Shell Oil. This piece, it feels really playful, almost irreverent. And it definitely raises the question, is he making fun of Botticelli? Is this whole thing just a joke? And yeah, pop artists for sure used humor and irony as tools, but it wasn't just for a quick laugh. See, in the 60s, the world was just becoming flooded with images. A picture of the Venus could pop up in a magazine right next to an ad for Shell Oil. Jacquet is asking a really smart question. What's the real difference between a high art masterpiece and a commercial logo when they both just exist as mass-produced images? He's using humor to get at a very serious idea. So, to kind of wrap things up, let's just look back at what we've seen. Each one of these artists took something totally ordinary and forced us to look at it in a completely new way. Edward Ruscha turned a gas station into a monument. Jacques Villiglé found history in street trash. John Chamberlain discovered a strange beauty in a car wreck. And Alain Jacquet treated a priceless masterpiece just like a commercial brand. What they all did was challenge the traditional definition of what art could be. The real goal here is that they encourage us to leave the museum and see our own world with fresh eyes. So I'll leave you with one final thought to take with you. What everyday object in your life, something you see so often you barely even notice it anymore, what if that could be reframed as a work of art? Thanks so much for joining me today.